So, no, it's just in case. No, no. No, and the thing is, you'd say, cover that fruit por si las moscas, just in case that flies down and get over it.
As a preposition for, but it should be for if.
Okay, so would you,
how would you translate this line from Shakespeare? If, but as well, I other accent borrow. If, but as well.
Por si las moscas. Por si las moscas, cualquier acento robo.
Good. That's great.
Por si las moscas,
Cualquier acento
robo. Te miré en mi verbo.
No,
No, pero no. Por si el azar me lleva.
also borrowing, not stealing, right?
Borrowing.
So, but here, how interesting, how in English it went from borrowing to an immediate, it is an immediate translation, but in Spanish it became stealing.
Mm-hmm.
So again, you gain and you lose, and now you have literally lost because it was stolen.
And also, there's an American writer, Elliot Weinberger, translator, and Octavio Paz and many others. He says anybody can translate nouns. The real challenge is to translate prepositions. So.
Speaking of which, I have a very dear friend. I'll plug him in. His name is Enrique Alexis. He's a wonderful writer and prose writer. And he had, a few years ago, he had translated one short story for one event of this kind. And he gave it to me. I being the Anglophile of the group of friends. And he said, would you just look over at this text? And in Spanish, not only in Spanish, but in Cuba, we have a very enthusiastic way of agreeing with you, which is, como no? And that's like, but of course. But I don't know. I know that we use it in Cuba. I don't know how. But anyway, como no? That's like, but of course. And this dear friend had maybe it's like, why? In English. Or why? but this piece was translated. I think there have been a part of maybe an automatic translator worked its way into it, and it was translated as how no. And I'm like, no, nothing. But that's the thing. Why? Yeah, but it's like, como no? But of course. But it doesn't make any sense that we would. And also in Spanish you have two words. In English you have about four, three syllables to begin with, 6 or 7. So translating, yeah.
Well, in Ilan Caban, this great scholar from I don't know where, from some Mexico. No, but here in America, from some university that I remember.
Amherst College.
Huh?
Amherst College.
So he was the other day in town, and I went to his talk, and he was presenting the phenomenon of Spanish as something very new. It was going to transform the whole landscape of English language, and it really struck me as something like odd. Somebody he's talented, incredibly well-read, and of course, a scholar. That he didn't know. He was treated phenomenon, something so new. He didn't know that it happened so many times within Spanish culture. Of course, during the studio Spanish period, in which Spanish is like a concoction of Hebrew and Spanish in many cases. Maimonides, who was a man born in Córdoba, wrote in Arabic and Spanish, of course, his second language, so they spoke in kind of like Arabic, Spanish, and this went on for many centuries. As a matter of fact, Spanish is a concoction made of these periods in which this bilingual phenomenon was going on. But not only that, I found kind of very strange that he didn't know that English also is
what made you expect from
what
someone
you
who...
said.
No, for someone who did a terrible job translating the video.
Oh, well. But, you know, it's very strange that English also is heavily infiltrated by French, by the French language. So these are things that happened before many times, and what we are experiencing now with Spanish and English.
There is another question there.
Well, actually, I didn't have a question, but I just wanted to, make a recommendation of a book to the fellow student, but he just left. I wanted to recommend Octavio Paz's Traducción, Literatura y Literalidad, which is excellent.
And you want to hear something really funny about that? And I know this because I have worked in the publishing industry for many, many years. The title of that book is Translation and...
Traducción, Literatura y Literalidad.
Okay. Translation, literature, and literary. That thing. That book is not translated.
Well, I was going to add that.
But wait, let's laugh.
Maybe you could take on that project.
What?
Maybe you could take on that project later.
Well, Cal State is going to now pump for that project. That would be wonderful.
Well, I was going to point out that there, Octavio Paz translates very difficult poets such as John Donne, which is a metaphysical poet, right? From the
Metaphysical poet.
metaphysical, yes. And basically, the essence of the prologue of Octavio Paz is that when you translate, you also create, which is what you poets have been arguing, I think. Right?
As he says, the difference between writing poetry and translating is that the poet starts writing not knowing where he's going to end up, but the translator starts knowing where he or she is going to end up. Yeah.
Well,
Very, very, very nice.
there are many ways also to approach the subject because there's a little meaning translation and there are many other meanings or levels of meanings to translation. Like, for instance, many Latin American critics and it's like a myth that goes around within literary circles that Borges' work in general is just a translation from English, the translation of Jack London, the translation of Gibbon. The influence is so great that he's been accused of being just, a translator in a wider sense of English literature into Spanish, just like Darío was in his time accused of being just a translator from the French. And but then you have José Martí, who had this very strange language in Spanish. It was very, very strange. And he was an exile and lived in New York 15 years, very important years of his life. He died in 42 and lived the previous 15 years in New York. And he wrote in Spanish, but his Spanish is the most amazing thing in the world. It's just very strange. It's very strange. It's just because in Spanish, heavily influenced by English. It couldn't be any other way. He was living in New York. And I don't remember all the words now, but I had a list of words that I was, like highlighting while reading my feet. One of them is really interesting, and he was writing for a famous newspaper at the end of the 19th century in Buenos Aires, Argentina, called La Nación. And these Argentinians were like, what the hell is this? That the Spanish was so amazing that they were like blown away by this language. One of the words is electrogrifar. Because at the time, the electrotype was an English word because of course, like today we get because the technical terms were born in English, of course, in American especially in New York at the time. So electrotype was, you know, a form of printing. And Martí, I remember reading him on the day. And then electrotypar, an invention, total invention. But it's